Favorability, job approval, and name recognition are among the things a group of 500 likely voters were asked about for a new Boston Globe Suffolk University poll released late last week. 68% of those polled said Massachusetts was heading in the right direction. Who should get credit for that? Well, they said Governor Charlie Baker, followed by the economy and the Massachusetts legislature. But what does all that mean? That's what I asked Democrat and political consultant Ryan McCollum and Kency Gilet, chairman of Springfield's Republican City Committee.
Well, I think that goes right in line with what we're seeing, and Governor Baker is running on the economy because he's had so much success. The fact that the economy is doing well overall nationwide, I think that it also adds to the larger picture that Baker is using the positive atmosphere in a nationwide economy to make sure to gin up business here in Massachusetts. So I think that he's right to campaign on it because he should take credit for it.
Of people who said no, they don't think that Massachusetts is doing well, they blame the legislature, 38%, then President Trump, then Governor Baker. Were you surprised to see the legislature make the top of that pile?
I'm not. I mean, it's kind of par for the course. Everybody dislikes the legislature, but they like their rep or their senator. But they think the body as a whole.
So you don't think this is putting elected representatives on notice?
Not necessarily, because the incumbency rate of people who get reelected is so high. So you hate the legislature as a whole. You might hate legislative leadership, but your guy or your gal you like because you voted for him. Yeah. And I think that's the same with Congress. Congress has very low approval ratings, but the same people keep getting reelected because people like their congressman and they like their senator.
Let's look at approval ratings. This poll did that for a couple of key officials. No surprise, they asked President Trump, what do you think? Approve, disapprove. 73% here in Massachusetts of the 500 or so people they polled said they disapprove. 22% approve. Surprise there? Here we are in Massachusetts.
No surprise, and it almost lines up with basically the breakdown of, the state is very Democrat heavy, and I think it was pretty close to the party lines, in terms of approval ratings for Donald Trump. So, no surprise there. I think this poll just basically signifies
tells us what we know,
right? Yeah.
And then the other question that they looked at, keeping with the president, should the House seriously consider whether to impeach President Trump? 53% came out saying yes.
Yeah, and I think, it just proves that Trump is a pretty polarizing figure. So if you dislike Donald Trump, you don't mind talking about impeachment. The people who like him love him. And so that kind of is in line with it. I mean, over 50% of the people thinking he should be impeached it's a pretty large number.
Well, I would look at where we are in this state again. So about 70% disapproved of Trump, but only a little over 50 said they would impeach him. So I think there are a lot of Democrats who would realize that there are no grounds for impeachment. I think they're looking at it in a pragmatic way. So I think that tells an interesting story.
The fact that Governor Baker decided not to accept an invitation to debate here physically in Western Massachusetts, there's going to be, someone involved from Western Massachusetts on one of the debate consortiums. Do you think that's going to hurt him at all among Republicans?
I think it won't. I think it's a non-issue. I mean, because no one's going to be sitting in a studio for that debate. So they'll be watching on TV or on their phones, online. So I think that's a non-issue. But those who don't like Charlie Baker, whether it's the far right or whether it's the far left, I think they're going to find a reason to complain. But it's not really an issue.
We saw some Democrats get pretty fired up.
I'm a Democrat. I like Charlie Baker. I do think it was a misstep. I think out here in Western Mass, we do have a complex of which we think that we're ignored by Boston a lot. And I think that choosing not to come here and debate was a bit of a misstep, and I think it will hurt him. It's not going to help him.
The poll also asked, if you were to vote, who would you vote for? Governor Baker, 54%. Jay Gonzalez, who's the Democrat, running 28%, 16% undecided. So even if all those 16% tip toward Jay Gonzalez, you're still only at 44. The numbers are still supporting Charlie Baker here.
So I don't trust those numbers too much.
Tell me why.
Just because, with the poll, they had to make a choice, undecided, Charlie Baker or Gonzalez. I don't think it's capturing a lot of people who may blank a certain ballot, and I'm speaking about the far right, and people who are the Scott Lively supporters. They're very fired up and upset about Governor Baker. So the question is, they're going to be out in force. I think we're going to have a record turnout for Republicans because of the Senate race and the AG, but a lot of people are saying, and it's encouraged by Scott Lively, to blank the governor's race. And so I think that
Because we saw more than 30% of people say in the primary they're supporting Scott Lively.
Right. So I think that poll's not capturing those who are going to vote but not vote in the governor's ballot. So
What are the tea leaves saying for you among Democrats?
Well, I mean, I think Charlie Baker has Democrats voting for him. And
not many people knew who Jay Gonzalez was, according
Correct.
to this poll.
And Jay, I worked with Jay when I worked in the Governor Patrick's administration. He is very, very smart, very, very capable. And, name recognition is one thing, but, he's going to be a formidable candidate. And the more, with the Trump unfavorability rates, as Jay can hang Trump around the governor's neck one way or the other, it's going to hurt him because there's, in that 50% that are voting for the governor, there's Democrats who are tepidly voting for the governor, who don't want anything, who like it.
You're shaking your head
Yeah.
no here. Why?
I think the Democrats would be hard-pressed to hang Trump around Baker's, but Baker has taken every opportunity to distance himself publicly and with his policies. And I think that the majority of voters in the state know that he is not in line with Donald Trump. I think that was one of the questions on the poll. So most people recognize that Charlie Baker is not in favor or not in line with Donald Trump.
And I think that's the case, but Jay has to make the case that maybe he is, and supporting Jeff Deal, who was Trump's chairman, is a case he made. He said he supports Jeff Deal, who will do everything that Donald Trump wants to be done in D.C.
We're short on time, so I'm going to move us on to the question about sexual harassment. And they said, overall, how important is this issue of sexual harassment or misconduct to you? 68% of people said very important. 23% said somewhat important, 5% not so sure, undecided. And I'm trying to remember, I think this poll came out even before the Brett Kavanaugh thing really heated up. What do you think of that response to that question?
I think if it was polled today, I think it'd be a lot higher, on people's
In
radar.
which way?
I think it'd be more people would be concerned about sexual harassment. I think that there's no question it's very prevalent, and it's only now with this Me Too movement that it's becoming more and more public. I do want to know about those who would say it's not or who are undecided, but I think it's a major issue, and it's no question that it kind of bleeds into every aspect of our lives, every type of field.